There used to be a record store in Sheffield when I was growing up called Rare and Racy. It's quite famous, tiny shop, and they used to sell second-hand records. And at that time, my best friend was Phil Oakey, who went on, obviously everybody knows him from the Human League, but we used to have incredibly eclectic tastes in music, and we're always interested in albums that looked like they might be unusual in some way. So, fascinated with anything that had anything to do with synthesizers, so often used to scan the details on the back of the sleeve for anything that had synthesizers involved. And of course the cover of An Electric Storm is amazing and beautiful, and I thought, this has got my name on it, and I didn't even know what it sounded like at the time. It was purely based on the way the album looked and the fact I was actively seeking out anything with electronic music involved, because I was obsessed with the future at that point, and basically anything that would enable me in the future to get excited possibly about getting out of Sheffield, which was in quite a troubled place at the time due to the economic situation. And so I bought it second hand, and I immediately fell in love with it, as I'd never heard anything like it.
I was in my 20s and I was working in a record shop, and I've been listening to a lot of the Radiophonic Workshop. Whether somebody put me on to White Noise, I just can't remember. What I do remember, I was also touring at the time with a band, and I took it on tour with me and was listened a lot on the tour bus, so I had headphones. I'd never heard anything like it. It was just really otherworldly to me, and I'd also worked in a recording studio tape hopping on dance music in the late 80s going into the 90s. Even though that was an exciting time, everything's quite structured for the dance floor in a different way, and this had similar aesthetics, but it just seemed completely wild and free. When you listen to it, it just hits you from all these different angles, and it just kind of breaks musical conventions of what you're used to. Yeah, it's like taking hallucinogenics, I think, listening to this album. It just kind of takes you over with its crazy imagination.
I remember very poignantly first hearing and being aware of Electric Storm. I can't remember the friend that introduced us to this record, but I remember the incident, and I remember the kind of look of the house. We lived in the countryside in the Midlands, near Northampton, and it was a country place, like a cottage of some sort, and it was somebody older than us who had new records, or by the time I listened to it, or we listened to it, it was about 73, I would think. I would be about 16 years old, just finding my way new into the world with music that I hadn't discovered from school or my dad, or so this is a new world. And I can really remember sitting there, mainly because I didn't really smoke pot very much, but that night we did smoke some weed, and I was terrifyingly out of it, and I was never good with this stuff. This guy, and I cannot remember who it was, played us White Noise, and it tipped us right over the edge. I remember Here Come the Fleas, for instance, being in hysterics about that and the sounds, and we were pretty much out of control and actually quite terrified by quite a lot of the dark stuff that was on there, remembering that we were only quite young, 16, and were having some kind of early drug experience, and so it was difficult, and stayed in my brain all my life, actually, now into my 60s.
The first time I heard An Electric Storm, I think it was in Kensington. There was a record shop I used to go to in Kensington, in London, and I used to buy most of my LPs there. And that would have been about 71, 72, wasn't when it first came out. It'd been out a couple of years. And that was the first time I heard it. I hadn't heard it on the radio or anything. And I didn't know anybody that knew the album even. So I bought it. And I must have listened to it, this album, at least 2 or 3 times a year. But then you think it came out 50 years ago. This is mad. That's crazy. I don't think there's any other album I've listened to that much. Maybe when I was doing the TG back catalogue, I had to keep repeating.
I came to it much later mainly because of my lifestyle and being very, very poor. I never bought records, so my only contact with anything like this was when, because I was on a totally different trajectory to Chris as well musically, was when I met Chris, and I couldn't tell you what year it was. When I heard it, I immediately knew why Chris loved it, because it was a combination of every little bit of music that I knew Chris was really into. Like back from things like film soundtracks and the female vocals and the kind of Beach Boyish kind of stuff going on, Pink Floyd. So yeah, I knew exactly why he liked it.